Okay, we are live. So welcome to Tamara's Closet today. As a huge dog lover, I'm so thrilled to have with me today a woman who is a bit of a dog whisperer and a dog behaviorist. She has worked for 2 decades or more with dogs kind of around the world and spent a few years, 16 years working with Cesar Millan as well. She's out on her own for a while now, and she will be sharing her journey as well as speaking about common dog issues and issues with the owners, as well as her workshops that she holds she has some that have a women's focus on building confidence to establish leadership. So I really want to go ahead and bring her out because I've got lots of questions. So today I'd like to give a warm welcome to Cheri Wulff Lucas from California. All right, can you hear me okay, Cheri?
I can hear you great. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I am truly excited to have you here. I'm just so passionate about animals in general. And of course, I'm a huge dog lover. And I always like to start with your background. And I want to know, were you surrounded by dogs as a child?
We always had dogs when I was growing up. Just usually one at a time. My parents didn't know anything about dogs, and the way we treated them was very different than the way I treat dogs now. We just didn't know as much about dogs, but I've always had them, and I've always wanted to be around a lot of animals since I was a child as well.
Yeah. So, when you were a kid, did you feel like you had a special connection with dogs? Was that?
Yeah, I think I did. When I look back on it, I feel like when I would see a dog, I kind of thought the dog kind of knew that I was sort of like them, when I was a very young child, and dogs did gravitate towards me a lot. But I had a lot of other animals when I was a kid. I had hamsters and cats, and I had a horse at one point. So I had a lot of animals, but I always wanted to do something special with dogs.
Yeah. Now, did your parents let you have them in the house as a kid, or?
Yeah, we had them in the house, but we didn't always fence them in. Like, I look back on it and I think, what were we thinking? They didn't have the dog fenced in, and they would take off for the day and they'd come back at night. And just the strangest thing when I think back on it, because my parents are both huge animal lovers. So I think it was just kind of ignorance as to what could go wrong. Nothing ever did, but it certainly could have. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're lucky. Growing up, my mom wouldn't let us have them in the house, and I always hated that. So,
yeah.
But we had them, but they had to be outside. So
yeah. A lot of dogs live that way.
How old do you remember when you realized you had a special gift and that, and a connection?
I'm sure that I was aware of it to a certain extent as a teenager, but when I got into my 20s, I definitely, I actually grew up in Central America. My dad worked for Bank of America, and so we left the Bay Area, San Francisco, and moved there when I was 12, and so I saw a lot of dogs, the feral dogs that kind of ran the streets there, and it broke my heart. To see them, they're third world countries. People don't have the ability to care for animals the way they do in our more Western cultures. But when I went to college, my parents had a dog that they were going to be moving to Venezuela from Guatemala, where I lived. And I went to all this effort and got my dog shipped to me in college. And I lived in a little studio apartment with my dog. And
really?
Yeah, and I was 18, and I managed to pull it off, so I just wasn't about to let her go. And she lived to be 16, so I definitely felt I had a connection, not like what I do now, because I didn't know anything then. I just had this emotional connection,
Well, you taught, I know in your bio or somewhere on your site, I was reading about your teenage years, and you said you suffered from chronic depression, eating disorder, and even feeling shame and hopelessness. And I kind of wanted to share a little bit about that time and how dogs became a huge part of your healing and teaching and how it changed your life.
Yeah, that started, I think there's probably lots of women that have eating disorders and don't even realize that's what they are. Our society makes it very difficult, especially now with social media. I didn't grow up with social media, but we get a lot of mixed messages of, you should be able to cook like this and eat this, but you need to, you need to look like this, skin and bones. And, like the magazines would show, now it's all social media. Everybody is filtered and airbrushed and looks gorgeous. So there's a lot of conflict, I think, that goes on in women's heads. And, when we're young and we're impressionable, and we're not as secure as when we get older, I think it's very easy to fall into that trap of being just obsessed with being thin and obsessed with what you eat. And it was sort of in vogue when I grew up. Everybody was sort of into, this is what all I ate was this today, but then of course that creates a lot of depression because it's unhealthy and it's an unbalanced way to be. And my depression was pretty severe, but we didn't talk about it then. People weren't open about that type of thing, as a way they are now. Everybody talks about the therapy they go to and the different things they do, but it just wasn't discussed. And the dogs really, really helped me through that, because as I began to rescue dogs, when I started my rescue career, there were a lot of things that I couldn't fix in the dogs. And what I realized was that I influenced the way I felt about myself, had a huge impact on the dogs, because dogs by nature are pack animals. And so by definition, a pack has to have followers and leader. And if the human doesn't present themselves as a leader, then the dog has no one to follow. So I believe that's the basis of a lot of issues that people have with dogs. And because I was going through what I was going through, I had to find ways to get out of that depression and begin to think higher of myself and develop the confidence and security that I needed so that I could be a leader, basically. That's in a nutshell, but that's like over a 20-year period.
Yeah. Well, how did all this lead you to getting started in the career with dog training?
Well, I had my rescue first, and but I had a lot of dogs that I had issues, one issue or the other: separation anxiety, dog aggression, aggression towards people, neurotic behavior, all these different things. And I bit off a lot more than I could chew initially, because I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't even know that was an aspect of. We always had good dogs growing up. We never had an issue with them, or if we did, I don't remember it. But I realized that at one point I had almost 50 dogs in my shelter, and I didn't have a single dog that I would feel comfortable putting in a home with a family and children. They all had, they all had something going on. And I am sure when I look back on it now that a lot of it had to do with me, with how I was, because I didn't know better. I had a shelter on my property that used to be a barn for horses. We modified it and made the stalls into runs. And so the dogs were there and they got fed every day and watered, and I took good care of them. But I didn't walk them because I didn't even know that was important. They all had little yards. I didn't have any help. I didn't have any volunteers. So it wasn't even a concept I'd ever heard of. Dog fulfillment wasn't a concept I'd ever heard of. It was just save a dog, fix a dog, get a dog a home. That was it. And so I was really kind of forced to find an answer and out of rescue. And then when I started looking, I heard about a man in LA who was really, really amazing with dogs. Never heard of him before, but somebody told me about him. And they got me the number, and I called down there, and it was Cesar Millan, and he answered the phone because he had this little place in the warehouse district in South Central LA, literally in the hood. He didn't have any help. He answered the phone himself. He spoke English, not great English at the time, but he spoke. I'm fluent in Spanish because I grew up in Central America, so we had an instant connection. And he invited me to come down with this one particular Rottweiler that I had that I couldn't fix. And so I went down, and it was a gift, really, because so few people have that opportunity. I was certainly the first one that he ever mentored. And I ended up doing 9 seasons of Dog Whisper. I was in a few shows, not a lot of shows, but I was in a few shows, but I was the master trainer for a lot of the other dogs. So I made them show ready. So they would take on a case and it would come to me and then it would go back out again. So I got a really insanely good perspective of dog behavior, and it was kind of the antithesis of what I'd always heard about give a dog a cookie and you can get them to do anything, and it's not quite how it works. So that's how I got my start, and as you know, the time went on, I learned to really lead, and not just dogs, but people, because people come to you really broken. You know, they have dogs that they are afraid they're going to have to lose. They're going to lose. They're either going to have to put the dog down or rehome them, and a lot of times the answer is so simple, and it just really requires the human to step up and lead, and not humanize their dog and treat their dog as if it's another fur baby to them. We have to honor the species that the dog is, the same way we want to be honored as women and humans. We want to honor the dog as a dog. That's what they want to be. They don't want to be a fur baby. They want to be a dog, you know. So that changed everything, and I learned how to fulfill them, and how exercise was so important to them, how boundaries were important to them, structure is important to them. They live in the wild. They live a very structured world, very structured life. They have to survive, right? They can't have chaos. And it just taught me a lot. I would say I kind of crawled out of that depression, and I haven't felt that now in, easily 20 years. So it was the answer for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So during all that time, did you go to other workshops or to learn more, or clinics about dog training, or did you just mostly learn it from working with him? Or
mostly with Cesar. I was basically being mentored by the best dog trainer in the world, probably still considered certainly the most well-known. And I pretty much devoted a lot of time to helping him. They didn't have a lot in the beginning. He and his family had a small home in Inglewood, a poor area of LA, or at least parts of it are poor. And they didn't have much. And so it was a treat because, you know, I was able to give things to them that they didn't have. And I love that because I've got kind of that way about me that I like to serve others and I like to take care of other people. So his 2 kids and his wife would come up and stay for a week at a time. And that was a lot of fun. So my core was and still is based on what I learned from him. I have deviated significantly in some areas. And I have learned from a couple, I would say 2 or 3 people over that course of time. Very few in the big scheme of things in a 21-year career. That's a lot of people go to 4 or 5 workshops a year. I've gone to maybe 3 with other people. So to just add addendums to what I know, not to radically change it, but to go a little bit more into the direction-based training as opposed to correction-based training.
Right. But you understand, you have a good understanding of why, because most people, their dog is part of the family. And is there ever a point you discourage that, or?
No, I want their dog to be a part of the family because dogs they're pack oriented, so they want to be part of the family. But it's just like, a lot of families, they'll have more rules for their children and their spouses than they do their dogs. You know, the dogs have free run of the house. The dogs are allowed to jump on them, get in bed with them, get on all their intimate spaces that humans normally occupy. The dog is allowed without even having to ask. The dog is allowed up on those spaces. They bark at their humans for when it's time to eat. They're commanding them for things. So I think that's part of what our Western culture has taught us, is to have to look at dogs from that perspective. And I think it's a disservice to dogs to do that. And you're talking to somebody who cares really deeply for my dogs, and I give them everything they want. But I know that part of what they want is structure, and they're lost without it. They want to know what role they play in the family. They don't want it to be sort of like, it's up to you, push your way through something and you'll get whatever you want. I don't think that's how most of us don't train our children that way. We have rules, and if we don't give our children rules and boundaries and structure, we're considered bad parents. But for some reason, we don't always apply that to our dogs, not realizing that inadvertently that's hurting them.
Right. Well, I would imagine, I haven't observed a wild herd of dogs or whatever, like I have horses, but I imagine they look to the alpha dog for direction, right? Or for leadership.
Yeah, they always have a structure. You know, when I was growing up in Central America, dogs we referred to them as feral dogs. They were just street dogs, and they would run in small packs, and you know, they knew where food was and garbage was thrown out, and they existed that way. And you still see them in parts of the United States. You can still find packs out, you know, dogs that are sometimes dumped in form packs. But yeah, they're gonna follow that. That's the interesting thing about dogs is dogs are going to always follow leadership over love. They're going to follow the smartest dog. You're back. Okay.
I lost you for a minute.
Okay. All right.
I can hear you.
Okay. So dogs are always going to follow leadership over love. So most animals will. They want to survive, so they're going to go with the smartest animal. Like if you look at a flock of birds, the birds that are flying, there's one bird in front, and that's not the most loving, affectionate bird. That's the smartest bird, the strongest bird, the one that they all feel that they can follow and survive. And so the same is true with our dogs. A lot of times people will have a dog and then they want to adopt another dog. And they'll tell me, oh, I want the dog that I already have to be the alpha or to be the leader of the two dogs because he was here first. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I've had dogs go into homes with where the owner had a very bossy dog, or so she thought, and that dog will just melt when the new dog comes in because the new dog comes in as a sheriff, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But we don't decide that anymore than you and I. If we went to a party or a function of some kind, there's always going to be somebody dominant in that room. You know, the one that walks up to you first, extends their hand, talks loudly, whatever it might be. But you know, you don't decide, oh, I want you to be dominant. It just, it is, you know.
Well, I've always heard this, and it was true with my little dog, my little Shih Tzu, because I've only had big dogs. But why does it seem that sometimes the little small breeds end up being the alpha dog? I mean, I hear a lot of people say that.
Yeah, I have a dachshund who's the king in my house.
Really?
He's about 12 years old. Excuse me, and he's like the king. And all the other dogs, even my Cane Corsos, weigh 120 pounds. And one of them is actually afraid of him. And he could stand on the back porch and just stand there with his little legs kind of apart, like in a stance. And the Cane Corsos won't come up on the porch if he's there. He'll show his teeth and everything. It's hilarious. I mean, I have some of the funniest videos of him doing that because it's, you know, dominance is a state of mind. It's not a physical thing. It's not about size. It's about your little dog, you know, maybe the king of all dogs. If you got 3 or 4 more dogs, that your dog might be the strongest one of the 4 of them.
Yeah.
But it does seem like there are a lot of very sassy small dogs. Sometimes I think a lot of it is because they're coddled so much. They're sort of empowered because, you know, when we spoke another time, you were holding your dog, your little Shih Tzu, right? And so we don't do that with Rottweilers or Dobermans or Pit Bulls. And so I think they get coddled a lot, so they become more powerful, and they're held up a lot too. So they're kind of at eye level with humans a lot.
Yeah.
So that may have a lot to do with the fact that they get a little bit full of themselves.
I know. Well, that's a good to know. I mean, I think there's probably a lot to that. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it's good to know. You know, when you branched out on your own, what was the most valuable thing that you took away from the years that you did work with Cesar? And because I know you traveled to different areas and things, is there anything that stood out the most that you could say?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it we've just talked about, but I guess the importance of I mean, I'm very much into leadership. I think leadership is so important in the world, and regardless of what type of leadership, political leadership, religious leadership, family leadership, I think it's a blessing to be able to have some of those attributes. And if I hadn't learned that, I would have gone in a completely different direction with the dogs. And I'm absolutely confident that I would not have been able to achieve what I've been able to achieve, because I would have been addressing the dogs in an entirely different way, of more of coercing them and negotiating with them for good behavior, as opposed to saying, these are the lines, this is the one you can't go over. It's not okay to jump on me. It's not okay to attack the other dog in the home. You know, you just make it very clear. And I feel like there's carryover in all of life for that. And for all of us that are put in positions of leadership, I think it's an amazing blessing. It's just an amazing thing. And it's an awesome responsibility to know that others are looking to you for leadership.
Right.
You know, I feel that way with my students that come to learn from me. They consider me a mentor. So that's an awesome responsibility. It's like, these are young trainers that I'm helping raise in the world. I want to make sure that every message I give them, everything that I talk to them about, is impeccably true. It's accurate. You know, if I make a mistake in front of them, I'm always the first one to go, hey, I just want to let you know what I just did with the leash with that dog. My timing was off by a second or so. I want to make that really clear to them, because I'm a leader, and I don't want to, it's not about whether they like me or not. It's whether they leave here, my place, knowing more than they knew when they came in, and that it's all accurate. So that's what I took from that.
Good. Well, that's good though, because I think that is important. And like, one of the things I see when a dog owner brings a puppy home, this is kind of what I wanted to know, because I know with baby horses, little foals and things, we think there's nothing to do with them until they get old enough to put on a saddle. And I learned from interviewing the horse trainer that there's a lot you can do with them. What can some of the people, what should be their first steps when they're bringing a new puppy home, and even a new, just older dog, so to speak?
I would, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it would be helping the dog understand what his position is. So if you look at a mother dog that has a litter of puppies, she begins to correct and direct those puppies from the time they're just a few days old. I mean, mothers will, if they get aggravated with a dog that's nursing for too long, a puppy that's nursing for too long, they'll give them a little quick correction with their teeth, and you'll hear the little puppy squeal, and then it's done. The puppy doesn't go around grieving that all day and feeling sorry for itself. The puppy just moves on. And, you know, when the mother dog walks, the puppies follow, and they automatically follow because they look to their mother as the one who's leading their pack. So I think the mistake a lot of people make is they start, this is important. Basically, when you first meet a dog, or when you first meet a person, even, there's an imprint phase, right? So if, for example, if you had a company and you wanted me, I wanted to interview with you to possibly have a position at your company. And if it was 2 p.m. and I knocked on your door and you said, come in at 2 p.m. and I walked in the door and I was like this, hi.
Yeah.
I already don't get the job, right?
Right.
Because I presented myself, and in a split second, you could see that I had a lack of confidence, right? So that imprint was made. We call it first impressions, but it's the same thing. So a lot of times what happens is and it's so hard to teach people not to do this. They're probably going to do it, but we want to begin by making it very clear to the puppies what their role is in the home and what they have access to and what they don't have access to. Much like a child or an infant that comes home, they have cribs and bassinets, and they're not left alone unattended. And so we want to do the same thing with a puppy and not do we just give it nonstop affection, it actually creates a lot of instability in the dog, because you can't, leadership and affection, they can go together, but they're not the same thing. So make the dog comfortable, whether it's an older dog that you get or a puppy. You want to begin to give that puppy directions the same way you would your child. Like you wouldn't wait until your child was a teenager before you started telling them right from wrong, or if they study hard, they'll do well in school, or whatever it might be. So that's that imprint phase. And from 5 to 12 weeks is a very impressionable time. It's considered an imprint phase. And if the dog isn't exposed to a lot of things during that time, or if they're taken from their mother too early and their pack too early, then that affects their ability to socialize. That's where you get these really fearful shutdown dogs that pee submissively when you call them to you, and that go into flight and go into to where they freeze and can't move. And you see the shelters are full of dogs like that have just been tossed in somebody's backyard and not exposed to sights, sounds, and surroundings, people, noise, voices. So the dogs, once they get out on their own, everything is upsetting to them because they've never been exposed to it before. So that imprint phase is really important. And if people could understand that when they go and get a puppy for the first time, that you have the rest of that puppy's life to shower him with affection. But in the very beginning, do so sparingly so that the dog understands all the aspects of what you have to offer, not just the affection side. That is love to me. It is love to give rules, boundaries, and direction. That is love. Without it, what are we going to do, right?
Exactly. Well, I think so. Well, I agree, because I think they're going to be happier when they're doing what you want them to do versus being scolded or whatever.
Yeah. Well, with enough direction, they'll never require correction.
Yeah.
I mean, theoretically, if we raise a child and we're perfect parents, and we give them everything they need to know to grow up to be wonderful adults that contribute to society and have successful lives. If we gave them every bit of direction perfectly, then they would never run into a scenario where they would have to get corrected or stuff, right? I mean, there's going to be something, but it wouldn't be based on their behavior. So if you look at that, the more we direct, the less we have to correct.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I know you work with some really extreme behavioral issues, and I believe I read you in Asia for a while doing that. And what's a good example of some of the extreme behavioral issues that you work with, and how do you approach those? I'm assuming they were dangerous things.
Yeah. Well, the most dangerous dog is going to be a dog that's going to hurt a human, of course. I mean, there are a lot of dogs out there that are great with people but can't be around other dogs. And, there are a lot of people that manage that behavior their whole lives. They don't get another dog, or maybe they have one dog that their dog gets along with, and no other dogs can be around. So they can get through life successfully that way. It's kind of a bummer when they can't be around other dogs, but they can do it. But when they bite, that's a whole different story. And there's different levels of seriousness to bites. The way I look at it, if somebody breaks into your home or comes into your yard unannounced, like it's somebody that's reading the meter, your electric meter, or a gardener, or somebody that's coming into the yard and your dog is out there. If a dog bites that person, it's not good, obviously, but there's a way you can rationalize it. Well, he's protective of his home. The person came in, as far as the dog knew, that was an intruder. So you can say, okay, well, that makes sense. I wish it hadn't happened, but that makes sense. Right. But when a dog bites its own family members, that's when it's a real problem, especially if it's children, because children can't make the right decisions. Like you could tell a child, don't have food around when the dog's around because he has resource guarding issues. But you've got a toddler that's got a handful of Cheerios and, drops the Cheerios and goes to get him at the same time the dog goes. I mean, how much can you manage that? With all management, there's a certain level of certain number of mistakes that are going to be made. At some point, management's going to fail. So those are the most serious cases in terms of the severity of the issue of biting. Like I can justify this, but I can't justify that. So those are tough. They can be resolved most of the time. Very, very few times are they unresolvable. But again, teaching a dog, well, let me back up a little bit. In most cases, the dog is behaving that way because they have been empowered. Or there's a lot of, in some cases, I mean, there's so much to talk about. I could be on with you for 10 hours, but
That's okay.
but in so many instances, the dogs are, this is what I did with dogs, so I can talk about this for sure. But because of my own lack of confidence that I had when I was younger, and kind of a void within me for intimacy and loving myself, I made the dog responsible for that. Like, I'm just going to coddle this dog. I'm just going to love up this dog. And this dog is going to love me unconditionally, which they do. But that doesn't help me get better or be stronger. And it's a huge disservice to the dog, because now the dog has this burden on them that they have to protect this weak human, right?
Yeah.
That's emotionally and psychologically weak. That's how a lot of this dog, or even dog reactivity, dogs that lose their marbles when they see another dog walking down the street, that's not aggression, that's reactivity. And now it can be aggression. I mean, if they get away from their owner and get to the other dog, they might attack the other dog, or at the very least, they're going to be reactive to the other dog. But many times that is precipitated by the human inadvertently creating that issue, because there's a part of them that's soft and weak, and the dog perceives that as, I need to protect this person. So as I'm walking down the street, basically their attitude is like, I've got this, stay back there, I can handle this intruder that's coming down the street. And then the reactivity begins. So when the human can learn to step up, and it's hard, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, it's an easy thing to say, you shouldn't let your dog get on the sofa with you. Anybody can do or not do that. But to tell somebody, you have to develop a stronger sense of who you are. You have to develop confidence. You have to forgive yourself for things that you've done that are making you feel lousy about yourself. Those are things that take years to resolve, right? Those, I mean, and we usually go to our grave with a remnant of some of those feelings. We don't ever resolve it completely. I mean, we're imperfect. We're imperfect with imperfect dogs. And so, but that to me, that's part of what helped me get out of my funk, was knowing that I'm not serving my dogs by not being there for them in a leadership capacity. I'm putting those dogs in an awful position where they feel that they need to step up for me. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and I think it's fascinating. I would have never thought of that, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think one of the ways that you can kind of show it to the client is, sometimes I take dogs in for 2 to 3 weeks or 4 weeks, sometimes boredom trains, where they leave their dog with me, and so I can immerse the dog in my pack and with my work, and do a lot more work and get the owner away, right? Because many times the dogs are going to continue to act a certain way in the presence of their owners. And so let's say I'm working with a dog that the owners can't walk. They're just always, the dog's dragging them down the street and coming up on, like this on anytime they see a dog or a human, it's just miserable. So they leave the dog with me, and it doesn't take that long to turn that around, actually. But then what I'll do is I'll ask the owner to meet me someplace in town where there's a lot of activity, and I'll be walking the dog with zero reactivity, and the owner will join me, and they're like, what did you do? They can't believe it. And to me, it's not like a big statement of how good I am at all. It's just that I'm not emotionally connected to their dog.
Exactly.
And so I'm not coddling their dog. I'm not treating their dog like a baby. And I'm basically being very straightforward with the dog, is that these are the rules for the walk. You're going to walk beside me politely. You're not going to jump on anybody that comes up to speak with us. And when I stop to say hello to someone, you're just going to wait by my side. And in all honesty, the dog feels better when they're behaving that way. Nobody feels good when they're upset all the time and reactive all the time. And so the owners see that, and that's what gives them kind of definitive proof that, yeah, this was a relationship issue that I had with my dog. It's not the dog. It's the context of the way the dog living with the human, and how the dog perceives the relationship to be.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it really does. It really does. I never would have thought about it that way, but I see it happen. Been living in apartments, and that's why I notice these things. It frustrates me because these people have their dogs, and the dogs, mine are. I'll go in parks, and when I had my dog that recently died, I'd have these two, and people go, wow, your dogs are so well behaved and stuff like that. But then I'd see other people, their dogs are out of control, and I have told so many people, you should take it to obedience school. You should go to obedience school, but then they never do. And
yeah, or they do and they don't apply it. I mean, it's tough because you are dealing with internal issues, emotional issues with humans. And I think, and I always refer to it as a Western culture thing because I know that I grew up in a third world country, several third world countries. So I know there's a difference in some countries about how they treat animals or how they perceive what an animal's position should be in their homes. They may treat them very well, but much like the way you were raised, they're not allowed in the home. People believe this is where the dog belongs, and it's just a very different way to be. But when an owner can see how the dog can actually behave, when there's no stress involved of protecting the owner, that's when I think the light bulb goes off, because they realize that they did have a part to play in it. And when I talk to the owners too, I'm very much into supporting my clients and my students. I don't want to ever, and I never do, shame them. I made tons of mistakes before I knew how dog psychology worked. I made so many mistakes. But our Western culture raises us that way, that we are to humanize our dogs. That's just what most of us do. Here's my new dog, and we're holding the dog all the time and coddling it, and there's nothing wrong with giving a dog affection. I'm not saying that at all, but I think sometimes we don't understand the way that dogs perceive things. For example, the day before yesterday, I had to take a German Shepherd that I just rescued into my vet, and he's a year old, and he's just a kind of a goober dog, just like all over the place, big dog. And they wanted to draw blood to do the junior wellness test, they call it. And he'd never been touched like that. But there were like 4 vet techs on him, and my vet trying to draw blood. And he was just losing it. And they were all saying at the same time, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Everyone knows that. And what I try to tell them is that when you're saying it's okay and petting the dog when they're having a meltdown, it's actually exacerbating the issue, because you're telling the dog it's okay to be like that.
Yeah.
And they're giving the dog a lot of affection, so you're actually nurturing the very state of mind that you don't want the dog to have. Whereas if you just stay very stoic and just let it be, the dog will come out of that at some point and realize that those humans helped me deal with this. They didn't nurture it and make it get worse.
Yeah.
So that's a hard lesson for a lot of people. I used to do it all the time.
Oh yeah. I know. That makes a lot. And I have seen vets do that. I know, because I've had a dog that was fearful of things. So I know it's hard not to coddle them when they're acting like that. Yeah. But I know one of this question is, and I was interested in this because I had a dog, the one that recently died, and I don't know what her background was, but she was afraid of her own shadow and anxiety. I seem to hear more and more about anxiety and separation disorder in dogs, and I don't know what's causing that. And she was a stray that I adopted 12 years ago, and she ended up being one of the most wonderful dogs, but I never could get her over her fear of noises, sudden movements. But she was very well behaved in public, and she was just fearful of noises and sudden movements, and how do you handle a dog like that? Oh, and the other thing is, she never barked. Never heard her bark. And my vet said maybe someone abused her with a bark collar. She was probably about 3 when she wandered into my life, but never heard her bark.
Well,
I thought that was sad.
Yeah, that's kind of unusual. I have a couple of dogs that don't bark, but they're feral dogs as well. I don't know if that plays into it or not, but what I was explaining earlier about the imprint phase,
Uh-huh.
what you're explaining about that dog is that dog. A lot of times people see that behavior of being afraid of noises and sounds and or think leaves falling or phones ringing or anything. And they think they'll come to me and say, "Oh, we think she was abused, or we think he was abused." That's what they usually attribute it to. But the reality is that imprint phase of that 5 to 12 weeks, if something traumatic happens to the dog in that time period, or if they're kept from things in that time period, we consider that a social deficit, meaning that, like, if you had a child and that child was kept in a room from the age of 3 years old to 5 and never exposed to sunlight or people or anything, that child, and there are cases where kids have been kidnapped and had to live like that for years, and they're never quite normal again because they lose that social deficit. They have a social deficit based on what they weren't exposed to. So that is more likely is that the dog was put, the dog you found was put in somebody's backyard and given a bowl of food once a day and never touched, never walked, never exposed to anything. So everything was new. Everything was, I don't know how to deal with it, because the most balanced dogs are the ones that I've seen growing up with the street dogs, because they're exposed. I mean, they'll be walking down the street with buses going by and, people honking at them and people shooing them off their porches, and they just are hardened, in terms of their ability to withstand different things that would spook most dogs. So I had a husky like that I actually found around where Cesar's old center was in Inglewood, or in South Central. And she was walking the streets and we would see her and she would look both ways before she crossed the street. I mean, she was so savvy. She was only 9 months old, but she knew enough to look each way and then cross the street. And she was on it was like 160th and Central Street. For anyone that knows LA, they know that area is awful. And it's just like nonstop and there's dogs everywhere. But she turned out to be so bomb-proof, like anything could happen and she would just yawn, whereas other dogs would be skittish. That's the most likely scenario, that your dog was never exposed to things. And that's what we're seeing right now with all of these, they call them pandemic dogs, people that went out and got dogs when the country shut down because they weren't going to work anymore. And now in California, we have the highest euthanasia rate that we've ever had the last 2 years. It is awful. And I know it's going on in other states too. I know Texas has a huge problem. Georgia has a huge problem. I mean, if I talk to a rescuer in any state, they would probably all say they're the worst state. It's really bad. I mean, that's because these dogs have never learned to be alone. They basically were right by their owner's side when their owner was working from home on a computer. So they never were exposed to anything. They never learned that it's going to be time for this human to leave and come, and they will be back, but that's what I'm seeing at the shelters. All these dogs that are saying, well, I'm giving my dog up because I can't contain him, because they're just freaked out about being left alone in a backyard now. I mean, it's really awful. And that's most likely what happened, was that there was some imprint made, probably a social deficit, where your dog wasn't exposed to anything for that period of time.
You're right. I had never thought of it that way. I just thought she maybe had been abused, Yeah,
that's what most people feel. I mean, and she could have, but I find that that's usually the case, because I'll have to get dogs out of the shelter that are just a few months old, that I'd be very surprised if something had happened to them younger than that. Or you find litters of puppies that somebody will call and tell animal control there's a litter of puppies living out in the middle of nowhere underneath a beat up bus or something, and they go out there. The dogs are completely feral, and they never quite get all the way up to normal. They can get pretty close, but probably not all the way.
I guess it's like people. You have people that that are street smart. You know,
Yeah.
they're, you know, if you dump me in a foreign country by myself, I'd probably be scared to death. you know, 'cause,
Yeah.
you know, but some people are just, if they've lived on the streets or lived in a lot of different places, it's just natural for them.
Yeah. I taught a workshop in Brazil several years ago, and my host was showing me around town, and we were walking downtown. I can't think of the name of the city that we were in, but downtown in Brazil, and there were business people walking down the street both directions, and then there would be dogs just walking down the street in both directions like nothing, staying on the sidewalk. And I was just blown away. And then sometimes they would go into somebody's building and get a little drink of water and come out and keep going. It was just amazing. And I said, wow, your dogs are, these dogs are, street dogs are incredibly, they look like well fed, and they look, you know, like normal dogs. And he said, oh, that's because they're the smart ones. The stupid ones got hit by cars. And I never thought about that before. But if you think about it, it's the survival of the fittest, right? The strong survive, the weak perish. So just like my dog, Natasha, in fact, she was on Joey's show years ago. We both went on his show when he was in Colorado. But she was so smart. And she's the one that I told you looked both directions before she crossed the street. She might have had siblings that never made it because they weren't as savvy as she was. You know, but you don't think about that. But it's basically those dogs were probably. I saw the same thing when I went to Istanbul, Turkey. It's amazing the way they take care of their street dogs there is unbelievable. Feeding stations all over town. You can find overweight street dogs. I mean, who has overweight street dogs?
Oh my God. That's really neat though. So people just kind of have food for them, and even though they're
food, and then they'll get them and take them to the vet and spay and neuter them, and then they put a little tag on their ear so they know it's been done. They don't pick them up and take them in again. And so their dogs roam the streets, and everybody's sweet to them. And I know there's parts of Turkey that aren't like that, just the same as here, you know, as anywhere. But I was blown away by Istanbul, how many street dogs were just well cared for. And probably from the street dog's perspective, they probably have the coolest life ever because they can go anywhere they want, you know.
Oh, no. Well, that makes me feel good that there are places where they are taken care of. I wish it was, I think that's kind of neat. That makes me feel good. I always worry. I'm the one that always wants to take a stray in, and I have a hard time saying no. Well, what's the most common mistake you think that dog owners make, is other than just not training them?
I think not. Well, there's a couple of things. Picking out a dog that fits into your lifestyle and home would be definitely the first mistake. I mean, sometimes all the other trainers that I know, we all feel the same way, that sometimes dogs just aren't a good fit for a home. You know, you've got an elderly person that lives in a condominium with no backyard. You don't want to go get a Jack Russell Terrier puppy. Not a good match, right? The high drive dogs that, you know, they have to chase and run, and they're pretty. They can be very difficult dogs. We refer to them sometimes as Jack Russell terrorists.
I've got two that I take care of when a client of mine goes out of town, and I love them. They're adorable. But that's what I call them sometimes. They're little terrorists because they're wide open, and I love them. But, you know, they need to be able to run. You know?
Yeah, they can be too much for a lot of people. But I would say picking out the right match, because, you know, these are relationships that we're going into with a dog. Well, look at, you know, the age of your dog. I mean, I've had my Natasha live to be almost 17, and
wow.
You know, dogs live for a long time. So that's why we always recommend that people don't get dogs as gifts for other people, because basically you're giving somebody, you're saying, here, this is the dog you're going to have a relationship with, and the person's going like, well, I didn't even want a dog, or I didn't want that dog. There has to be that match, just like in a human relationship. So I think that would be really honestly looking at your lifestyle. If you've got a super busy life and you've got 2 toddlers or young kids and you're really active with them, going everywhere together, if somebody came to me and asked me what they should get, I would probably say, why don't you go adopt a nice, easygoing dog, maybe a mixed breed, middle-aged or 2 years old, 3 years old, somewhere in that range. If you get another puppy, now you've got it's like having another child. You've got to potty train that dog and teach them, and it's a lot. I mean, and kids, they kind of sometimes will bend because their kids want a puppy, and that's great, but the kids are going to grow up and get interested in girls and boys and all the other things that they want to do as they get a little bit older, and then the puppy's going to be on the back burner, and that's how that happens a lot. So I would say the first thing they need to do is get an appropriate breed for your lifestyle. And then the second mistake would be not waiting and not training the dog, because dogs begin learning from the day they're out of the womb, basically. Their mother will guide them and teach them and correct them, even physically correct them. And a lot of people think they can't start training their dog till they're 6 months old. Well, by then, that personality pattern is pretty much ingrained. So you can begin teaching a dog how to walk on a leash, put a little leash on them and let them drag it around the house a little bit so they get used to that sensation around the neck, and then it won't, some people don't even put leashes on their dogs until they're a few months old, and the dogs act like they're dying every time you put a leash on them.
Yeah. Well, another common problem I hear, and I hear from other people who live in a crowded neighborhood where the houses are close together, or even in apartments or condos, whatever, is obsessive barking. And I was just curious as to, how do you teach dogs not to bark without these horrible muzzles and things like that?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. Honestly, that is a tough one. A lot of times, a dog is frustrated because they're not given what they need, and exercise-wise, every dog needs to. Dogs aren't meant to just be stationary and be in somebody's home. When we come and go as we please as humans, mm-hmm. But the dogs being able to come and go is contingent on us and what we're willing to do with the dog. So I think a lot of dogs are super frustrated, and that's what's behind the barking. That they just aren't getting their needs met. But it is a problem, and there's not an easy answer to it. If you're training your dog by teaching them all the other things that they need to know, to not resource guard, to walk properly on a leash, and fulfilling them, you're not going to have as much of that issue. And here's another thing: they should be crate trained from a very early age, like immediately crate trained. Some people think that it's mean to crate a dog. It is mean to not crate a dog, in my opinion, because dogs at some point are going to need to go to the vet and maybe stay over, maybe have surgery of some kind, or you might need to board a dog where they're going to be crating the dog at the boarding facility. If you don't teach them to be okay in a confined space like that, then you're going to have a real problem with the barking. In their natural world, dogs make dens out of hillsides. They will carve out or dig out an area where they can go in. They like that feeling of being inside of something and being contained. That's why dogs like to get under your chair or your table or under your bed, or they like those tight spaces, because they're hardwired to like that. And so a crate is just a den for a dog. It's all it is. It's just today's version of a den for a dog. And my dogs all crate. That when it's time to eat, they all run and get in their crates, and they all eat in their crates. So nobody else is bothering them, and there's not an issue of resource guarding. They can eat in peace. And that's a good association for the crate to have, is that, oh, I love crates because that's where I go to eat. And sometimes if I'm up late and I'm in my house and I have my laptop open and I'm getting work done, I'm staying up later than normal, I'll turn around and my dogs are gone. They're all in their crates with the doors open. They were like oh, you stay up late, you go ahead, I'm going to bed. They'll just go to bed because I've taught them a good association with a crate. And, we live in an area here where there's a lot of fires in California. So I have a big van here with crates in it. So if I ever have to evacuate, I'm not going to have dogs struggling to get into crates. They're going to go right into the crate. And that's another good reason to train your dog to be okay with a crate.
Oh, it is.
All of those things together can really help with dogs that bark. It's usually just it's an unbalanced behavior but there's usually something behind it, a frustration.
I have one I did because I asked some people what they would like you to answer, and another question I had someone want me to ask you is they have an elderly pit bull, and he's barking only at night, and he excessively barks at the owner just at night, and the vet thinks the dog has dementia, and that's why it's bad at night. And is that something that's common when a dog gets old? Or
yeah, they don't see well and they don't perceive things well. And I had an old dog that used to stand in the corner, facing the corner, when she got really old. She got to be about 15 and just didn't realize, just couldn't snap out of it. They get dementia, and then it's called vestibular. I don't know the whole name of it. It's something vestibular disorder where they lose their balance. If you've ever seen older dogs that sometimes will circle for no reason, go in one direction, that's a vestibular disorder, and that can actually be medicated with a very inexpensive medication. So if the vet may have not deemed it vestibular if they didn't give them, if he said it's just the barking's probably because he probably can't see because he's older, and he used to be able to see things in the dark, but now he can't. It's hard to say, but dogs are just like us. I mean, as we get older, unfortunately, our senses are not as good as they once were. So that could be it. There's, is this a friend of yours or somebody that just phoned in?
This is someone I work out at the gym, and they knew I was interviewing you, and they said that also the dog acts like he can't hear them when he comes home, but then if he goes in the kitchen and opens the refrigerator, the dog's standing right there beside him all of a sudden. Yet he didn't hear him come in.
Yeah, well, but he probably, they can feel the vibration of the floor. That's how a lot of blind dogs can find out where you are, because they feel the vibration of the floor. And so that, and if it's habitual that they come home and feed him right away, then he's probably on a clock,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would just, ask the vet if there's anything. I would think that the vet would have already thought of giving them something.
I think they are on something. I just think they wondered if there was anything, if that was common. I've never had one bark like that at me, but this is the oldest dog I've ever had. I've never had one to live past 10, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, well, your little guy's looking great. He's so cute.
Yeah, I'm so feel special that he's lived this long. So, but that's it. One of the things that I wanted you to share is we. We have such a bad reputation for certain breeds, what they call the bully breeds. And I was curious, do you think society, it's gotten worse because society, the way they portray them, or is it, I know they can be rehabilitated or whatever, but is it really a certain breeds that are really that bad, or is it how the owners have handled them, so to speak?
Yeah, and how they've, how their first part of their life has been. Probably my most social dog with people and with other dogs is named Stella, and she's this little chunk of a pit bull. Looks like she's got, a little staffy in her. Maybe she's just a little fire plug, and everybody loves her, and she will entice any dog to play. Bjorn's one of my other pit bulls. My pit bulls are all amazing, but any dog can become unstable, any breed. I mean, I don't know. Usually, when a dog bites somebody and something awful happens, it makes the news if it's a pit bull. It doesn't always make the news if it's a different breed.
Right.
But dogs can, believe me, over the years, I've dealt with lots of different breeds that are, that have been trained inappropriately. And the other thing, it's not a very popular thing to believe, but you have to kind of see it this way too, is there is mental illness in the world, in animals. I mean, there is certainly with people, and some of it are things that people are born with. It can't be predicted, and so there would, I've worked with some dogs that I could just tell something was off, just something is off, and they were unpredictable more than anything, and they could be fine for long periods of time, and then something would snap. There's something called rage syndrome. That I don't want to get into it too much because I'm not an expert at it, and I'll sound
right.
But it is. You could talk to your people could talk to their vet about it, or you could read up about it. But it's a syndrome that I believe it's more common in a certain type of spaniel, but I can't remember. I know when I was working with Cesar, they had one named Oliver. He ended up coming and living with me, but that dog would just have a trigger that would go off in him, and his eyes, you could see his eyes were just, he was gone. And he would attack whatever was next to him, and then when it was over, he would just be like, oh, what was that? Almost like a seizure, but he was very dangerous. So those are the scariest ones because they don't give warning, and you don't know what sets them off. Other dogs will attack somebody defensively if they feel that somebody is going up, if somebody's in their territory that shouldn't be, or they resource guard. Again, that can partially be managed to a certain extent, but everybody should know how to move a dog away from something instead of going in and grabbing them. That's when people get bitten, is they go to try to take something from a dog without understanding that the way, in their natural world, the way a dog would get something from another dog is to basically posture in front of them and step in, and the more submissive dog is going to drop whatever they have and move away, or there's going to be a fight. But dogs aren't primates. They don't have arms. They don't go in and grab something. They just basically, I can tell a dog leave it in my yard, whatever they pick up, and they'll drop it and keep going. So, but that takes training. So yeah, I mean, I think the news is always going to tell the story of the dominant breeds, the bully breeds, the Rottweilers, and I mean, there's still even insurance policies you can't get. Homeowners insurance you can't get if you have a German Shepherd or a Doberman or something. I don't know if that's out where you live, but it is in California.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, some policies, and it's amazing some of the breeds that they forbid. But yeah, and if they're raised inappropriately, definitely, it depends on how you raise them. I mean, a dog that's raised with boundaries and knowing what their role is in the home, very seldom are they going to develop issues like that. I don't care what breed it is.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been chased down by like a Dalmatian before years ago, so I've been bit by a Labrador. I mean, and so.
Yeah, and I think there's also some breeds are, like, I remember when I got into this business, Rottweilers were so stable. And I see I see some imbalance in that breed with some dogs now. I also know some that are just absolutely amazing. But sometimes if a certain breed is inbred a lot repeatedly, they can develop some imbalances from that. Dogs that become really popular. I mean, right out here we have Huskies everywhere. Huskies, probably from the movie. The same way everybody went out and got Dalmatians when the movie came out. And
oh yeah,
remember that. So, yeah.
Well, when you handle a dog like that, like a pit bull or a dog that's the society sees as dangerous, do you take different steps with them to make them sociable? Or is it pretty much the same process with any breed?
They're all dogs. They're all dogs. I mean, some are born with a propensity to do things like the cattle breeds. They herd, so a lot of times people will get. I had a client with a dog that he would leave at home. It was a border collie. When he came home, the dog would have all of his shoes out in the middle of the room, piled up in a little pile. herd the shoes, and we had to kind of work around that, but it was never anything malicious. It was just the poor dog needed an outlet, and sometimes I'll suggest for people that have dogs like that. There's lots of places in California, I don't know other parts of the country, but where you can take a dog to have them herd sheep. They work with people that do that, and it really fulfills the dogs. And you can see that what they were actually bred for. It's pretty fantastic to see dogs that they're actually doing what they were born to do, and that what was turned into them. I had a border collie that was a client's dog in Los Angeles, and they had gotten this dog from the top border collie breeder, and they bred working dogs. The father was a champion in Ireland. That's what they did. I mean, they competed, and so these people they could afford the best of the best, and so they got the best of the best without realizing that maybe they should get a breed that is bred to be a pet, not a working dog. And he was the coolest dog, smart as a whip, and a really good temperament. But in their home in Beverly Hills, it's like there was no outlet. The dog didn't know what to do, so he was just nonstop moving. He couldn't be still. He just couldn't contain himself. And so they brought him to me. And then ultimately, after I trained him, we had a long, very sincere conversation with each other. And I said, if you would like me to rehome him, I can get him a home that's appropriate to him for his breed and what he likes to do. And it broke their hearts, but they knew it was best for him. And I got him the most phenomenal home with someone that had adopted 2 other dogs from me over the years. I've been doing this for so long. I'm getting into second and third generation homes that I've placed dogs. And so the woman, it's a couple, and this woman is amazing. She's not a trainer, but she could be. But she does all these games with him. She does those puzzle games where he finds things underneath the puzzle. She takes him to sheep herding twice a week. It's unbelievable how fulfilled this dog is. And so that's a perfect example of putting a dog in a home that was made for that dog. He doesn't have an actual job, like he doesn't live in a ranch, but it's probably better than a ranch.
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful story. Well, they do need to have the right home.
Yeah.
They really do. Do you have a favorite breed that you enjoy working with, or?
Oh, I love Huskies. And I love Pit Bulls. I'd say those are my 2. And I think because I had such an amazing Husky, Natasha was just unbelievable, smart, super smart, and very independent. And I like independent breeds. I prefer those over clingy. Independent breeds, because there's no breed that's independent. But I would say that Huskies have a little bit of aloofness to them. Some of them. Yeah. Can be, but I like to kind of admire that in a dog. So they're fun and they're smart. I rescue a lot because the shelters are just brimming with Huskies everywhere.
Really? I wonder why.
Well, they all went out and got them 2 years ago. Now they're all being dumped.
They're still from the pandemic. Yeah. I had a half Husky, half Border Collie that I adopted when he was young. The neighbors couldn't keep him, and it was an amazing dog. He was beautiful. He was black and white from the Border Collie, but he had the ice blue eyes of a Husky. He was a smart dog, but
yeah,
I don't know. That's my only experience with a Husky. So,
yeah. But I love Pit Bulls too. My Pit Bulls are so great.
I think they're great dogs. I know a lot of people that just love them.
Yeah.
They are. Well, I wanted to know, let's see, because I want you to, because you kind of went over that. I wanted you to talk a little bit about your second chance ranch, but also your workshops that you have for women, because you talk about they're designed to help women build confidence. And I want you to have a chance to share about the workshops and how they help women and establish leadership.
Yeah. Well, I have, excuse me, I have several workshops I teach. I do about 14 a year. 2 of them, I might do 3 this year, but at least twice a year I do the Wellness Unleashed, and that's for women. And it's very small. I only take 6 women. So it's like a little family, and it's a 3-day workshop. And women bring their dogs, and then we basically talk about, because there is such a connection in the emotional health of a human and how that impacts the health of the dog. And so that's where the idea came up with for this. And so we work with the dogs one-on-one is half of the workshop, and then the other half is basically going over things about learning how to reframe your thoughts, how to challenge your thoughts, as opposed to just having some thought go rampant in your head about something that you feel negatively about, but how to be able to stop and think about, now, wait a minute, does this make sense? Why should I hold on to this? And that, because that can create a lot of depression and a lot of low self-esteem. So I have several concepts that we address in that workshop specifically for women. And then the other workshops I have are, it's called Learn to Lead, and that's a 3-day workshop. And that's really for trainers and civilian dog owners. We get a little bit of probably 50-50, to be honest with you. It's a 3-day, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the same as Wellness Unleashed. And we work with 12 working spots. So people bring 12 dogs all together. And then we have about 20 audit spots. And it's here at my ranch. And we just go over everything. It's whatever the case is what I address. So I kind of teach people how to think on their feet. Okay, here's this dog, and this dog has this issues. Where do we begin with him? What do we need to teach him? How do we need to shift our relationship with him and learn how to fulfill them? And so that's the 3-day one. And then the mentorship program is called Train the Trainer. And that's the most intense. And that's a 5-day course with 6 students that bring their dogs in. It's just nothing, but everybody's exhausted. Usually by the 3rd day, they're exhausted. And the dogs are too, but we cover everything you can possibly think of.
And that's for actually people who are dog trainers or wannabe trainers, or
I get both. Sometimes I get people that are in the dog industry. They're groomers, and they want to know how to handle dogs better, or they're like toying with the idea of becoming a trainer. A lot of dog walkers that don't even realize how good they already are. Because they know how to handle and socialize a pack of dogs. They think of themselves as dog walkers, but they're actually trainers, because there's a lot. When I first started working with Cesar, that's all we did was walk all day. We would walk for 3-4 hours in a day with a pack. And just that alone is incredibly powerful, because you kind of reset the dog back to being a dog again. There's all this dog aggression, supposedly, or dog reaction. A lot of it's just reactivity, not dog aggressive, but it'll reset the dog socially, because the dog can be in a group of dogs and see that at the end of the activity, nothing went wrong. So it develops trust from the dog towards the human that kept everything together. And it teaches the dog that other dogs mean no harm, do not mean the dog any harm at all. So just pack walking alone is hugely beneficial. So I get everything. I get dog trainers, dog owner, or people that are just stymied. They just don't know what to do with their dog. They've just gone to 1,000 different trainers and tried everything, and they still can't. They just need an intense course, where the dog is just analyzed from different perspectives and taken through a more intense course. And that's my Train the Trainer course.
Oh, that sounds great. I wish you were closer to me, especially when I had my difficult dog,
Yeah.
Okay, this one, I know this is probably may not be your area, but I was just curious what you thought about all these foods and supplements that are popping up all over Facebook. It just comes around on Facebook constantly, and all these things for the newest and the greatest thing for your older dog, and special foods or things to put in your food versus the typical average foods out there. You'll see Dr. So-and-so and developed it. I mean, are some of these things distractions or
I think it's the same as with people, with the humans. Obviously they know your social media knows your number because
Yeah.
I could be talking about going on a cruise, and the next thing I know, I get ads on Instagram about cruises. So somebody's listening.
Yeah.
And they all know that I like to work out, and so I get constant gym, athletic wear and stuff like that is constantly.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like with people, I'll have somebody tell me that they really liked this certain supplement because it really helped them think clearer or be more relaxed or whatever. And then sometimes I'll look at my little container of all my supplements and I'm like, I don't even know if any of these are helping me or if they're even working. And I'll go through this process of just getting rid of it all. So it's kind of hard because we don't really know. We don't really know unless it's something that we take and we instantaneously feel like, oh my gosh, that was it. How did I ever live without this? Like right now, my thing is mushroom coffee.
Mushroom coffee.
Mushroom coffee, yeah, it's amazing. And I got off of I was drinking a really high quality coffee called Purity, and it's great coffee, but it was just getting me too agitated, and I think it was kind of hard on my stomach. But like I didn't know. Like I actually, frankly, saw the ad on Instagram, and then I started hearing other people talk about it. All that it does for you. They refer to it as nootropics. It's got a lot of benefits to it, but I don't know. I might have tried it and then thrown it out. So I think I know what I like to use for my dogs. That I think really works. They've been on a raw diet for probably 14 years. So
raw diet. Okay.
Yeah.
So you do like the raw diet?
Yeah, they are. It's not cheap.
I know.
I would say I work so that I can feed my dogs.
Is it raw chicken and raw different types of meat or just?
It's mostly beef. I have a couple of dogs that are allergic to beef, so that I use chicken, and I actually use a mix that comes in a dehydrated form, and it has everything in it that basically if a dog killed something in the wild, killed a rabbit in the wild, they would eat the organs of the rabbit, whatever the contents of the stomach, inside the stomach, grass or berries or whatever, all the different things, it replicates that. And then you just add beef to it and water and you make this mixture. And I make batches of it, and then that's what they eat during the day. I have some supplements for bones and joints and stuff like that I really believe in as well. But it's how many things have you tried and then you just like we never know. We can watch ads all day long and never know what really works or not. It's just trial and error, I think.
I know. Well, somebody told me one time that I think with people vitamins, it's what if you believe they're helping, they will. And I thought, but you can't tell a dog to believe that the vitamins are going to help.
Yeah, no, that's so true. That's so true. Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, I was just curious as to what your take was on that.
Yeah, there's no placebo effect with dogs. It's either working or it isn't.
I know. Well, I got one last question. What would you say you've learned most about yourself from your career through working with dogs and people, I guess?
How important it is to be present and show up. And again, I know I'm talking about it ad nauseum, but I think that's part of leadership. I know it's part of leadership is showing up. I had a workshop that just ended last week, and I had a senior dog that I knew I was losing him for a few weeks before he died. And he ended up dying just a few hours after all of my students went home. And I knew it was going to happen, but I had to compartmentalize what I was going through because I was still obligated to lead. I had to teach. And it was a really good lesson for me. And I've done it multiple times. It's not the only workshop I've ever taught where something like that was happening. It's actually happened 3 times to me. But I think
You've lost several recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. And this was the most recent. And so I didn't have the luxury of laying on the floor with him, every day until he died. I had to go out and teach. I mean, fortunately, I teach from my ranch, so I'm here. But I didn't have a choice. And I think it was good that I didn't have a choice, because I needed to learn how to step up, because we're all going to get to something's going to happen at some point in our life where we can't go into a panic mode, and we can't go into just a shutdown mode. We just have to still go out there and make things happen. And I felt that I did it successfully. And so I think that's part of being present and knowing that things are happening, but they happen to all of us. I'm not the only person in the world that's ever lost a dog. We've all gone through it. And so, I knew that I'd given him the best. I mean, he was going to be put down at a shelter, and I adopted him as a senior about 1.5 years ago. So he was a mess. He had bladder stones and rotten teeth and masses all over his body. And I revitalized him, and he was not an easy dog for anybody to handle, but there was something about him that was really special. So I think we have to learn to be present and conscious of everything that's going on in our lives. And I always think, what impact am I going to have on this person or this dog if I meet them? Are they going to feel better at the end of meeting me and spending time with me, whether it be the dog or the person? Can they take something from the relationship we've just begun to develop, or is nothing going to happen, or is it going to set them back? I always want to lift people up and help them see what their potential is, as well as the dogs.
Oh, that's great. That was a great answer. I know I threw that one on you.
I know I wasn't prepared for it, but
you did great. I know, but you did great. So I could keep you here all day. Is there anything because I know you didn't really get to talk about your rescue much. Is there anything you want to mention about anything, or how can people help? Is there a way people can help you?
Oh, yeah, they can definitely help. So my rescue, it's been around for over 30 years, and we've rescued and placed more than 5,000 dogs in that time. And they've all come from, with very few exceptions, they've all come from death row, basically, at the shelters. We are 100% funded by people that help us. We might get a couple of grants, maybe 1 or 2 a year, but it's basically people that support us, help by donations. It's run solely by me, unfortunately. I'm it. We've had help before. Well, and my assistant, Holly, she volunteers her time, like going over applications, people that are applying, setting up appointments, things like that. But the physical care of the dogs is me. I have I think I mentioned, people that built my house had Belgian draft horses. So they had a really nice barn for them.
Oh, yeah.
But over the years, I've had contractors and people donate their time and their supplies, and they poured concrete and we lowered the ceilings and insulated the building. So it's nice and toasty in there, and it's not a barn anymore. It's basically a building. And so the dogs live down there, and they have inside out. Their little inside runs are about the size of a child's bedroom, maybe. They're small, but they have doors. They each go out into their runs, and they're cared for impeccably. Everybody gets whatever they need here. Sometimes we get medical cases that are hard because they require a lot of money, but we treat the dogs. They all eat great food, and they get all their needs taken care of. But yeah, absolutely. If people want to donate to the rescue, that would be really appreciated. Again,
and they can go to your website for that.
Yeah, they can go to. I have links from one to the other, but my Second Chance website is secondchancelove.org. The name of my rescue is Second Chance at Love Humane Society, but the website is secondchancelove.org. And
I'll make sure I put that under the YouTube video.
We also take Venmo. We have a Venmo account that we can take donations. and PayPal as well. I can give you all that too.
Okay, that'd be good, and then I can put it in the YouTube description in
But
there.
it all goes, we have no salaried employees. We have me and my assistant Holly that does things remotely, and we don't even have any volunteers, unfortunately, with the exception of there are some people that will help us, a couple of really good friends that will help us transport dogs from shelters in LA, because I'm 3.5 hours north of LA. And most of the dogs I pull are from Southern California. I'm on the Central Coast, so we do have that, but we're 100% driven by donations.
And so you take them from the kill shelters to your place, and they're on death row, and then you find them homes eventually, if you can.
Right.
Yeah. How many do you keep there at a time, do you think?
Well, right now with the storms, it's tough because the shelter is at the base of a hill, which I don't know why the people that built this place decided to put a barn at the base of a hill, because when it rains, a lot of the mud goes down there. So we've tried everything. We've tried fancy French drains and ways to divert the water, and it's still. So right now, as we speak, we're having a huge storm in California. We've already got trees down. It's really bad. So half of the shelter is unusable right now because the side that the hill is on is all mud. So some of the dogs are down at the shelter, but a lot of them are up at my house, which is tough because I have to rotate them. But I mean, you do what you have to do.
Yeah.
It's beautiful down there. I post a lot of photos of, there's a 600-acre vineyard behind my property.
Oh, really?
Around it, yeah. So I'm at the highest point of town in Templeton, and I don't have any neighbors, but I'm only 6 minutes from the freeway. So it's a cool location. I've been here 25 years.
Goodness.
It's a pretty cool location. Yeah, it's good for having dogs for sure, because we can walk on the property and everything.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But people can find me. I also have a lot of videos, training videos as well, that are on my YouTube channel and mostly on my Instagram. I'm bad about getting everything over to YouTube. I need to be more active at that. I just hired a virtual assistant, so hopefully that'll help.
That'll help. And I've got an event page for you on Facebook, and I'm going to put some of your videos in there from YouTube. I found your YouTube page. So, yeah, those are good as well.
And I'm going to give you the link. I don't know why. There's a Facebook page I've been trying to take down forever. I can't seem to get down, but I'll send you the link of the one that's my primary one, and my Instagram one. And if you want to put that up too, it's fine. I think I lost.
Did not tag the advertisements. I don't know why it wouldn't pop up. It kept popping up the old one. So.
Oh, really? Social media is tough. And then if you have a problem, who are you going to go to? You can't go to anyone.
I know, but I'll get all that from you again. And is there anything else you wanted to share or mention, Cheri?
Oh, I appreciate everyone that's been watching us, and I love what you're doing. I think it's amazing. And if you have a place in your family or in your life to rescue a dog, now would be a really good time to do it. But there's so many out there that need people right now. Whatever part of the country that you're in, it's everywhere.
They really do. Oh, and I have to get your opinion on this. I was going to ask you, what do you think? What goes on in your mind when you hear people say they are just dogs?
They're what? Just dogs? Well, I guess you could say, well, you are just a human. So I think those of us who love dogs know differently. They're part of our family.
Yeah.
I think there's statistics out that a lot of times people grieve the loss of their dog more than they grieve the loss of some humans,
I believe it.
They're so innocent. The dogs are so innocent. I think that's why we love them at such a deep level, because there's no bad history with them. Even if they're misbehaving, they're not misbehaving just to, deliberately. They're not moral creatures just deciding to do something wrong. They're just instinct driven.
Yeah.
So I think that's why that bond is so deep, and that's why it's so painful to lose them. But lots of wonderful senior dogs out there too at shelters, and there's ways too that you can find out things. So a lot of these shelters have someone there that evaluates the dogs for them, and that's always helpful if people are concerned about. This is what I want to say.
Okay.
There's a lot of times people say, I want to get a dog as a puppy from a breeder because then I can raise them the way I want. Okay. So let me tell you what the shelters are full of. More than 50% of the dogs at shelters are purebred paper dogs. So somebody got those dogs as puppies and abandoned them. You can get purebred Rottweilers, Pit Bulls, Huskies, Border Collies. There are even breed rescues that's all they do. There's a rescue in Fillmore, California that has over 200 purebred Dobermans. 200. So when you hear somebody say that, you have to stop and say, I always ask people, do you have kids? Oh yeah. How many do you have? 3. Well, are they all exactly alike? No, they're not anything alike, but they were all raised by the same parents in the same environment, in the same home, but they all turned out differently. So if you get a dog from a breeder, that does not automatically mean you're going to get a good dog, because there's lots of dogs that wound up at the shelter. On the other side of it, if you get a dog from a shelter that's been there for a while and the people know the dog, you're actually getting a dog that is who they're going to be. Like if you get a puppy, puppy's all sweet and wonderful, but if they're not trained the right way, they can grow up and be very different than they were as puppies. But if you get a middle-aged dog, what you see is what you get. That's who they are. So it's a lot less risk involved for somebody that's got a family. Go out and get yourself a nice 3, 4, 5-year-old. Or like I'm about to get a 12-year-old senior German Shepherd out of a shelter in LA. That is just breaking my heart. You'll see me post about him.
Okay.
I made the decision last night because Orion died. He was the other senior that I just had, and that I just lost a few days ago. So I got to have one more. Geriatric senior is what I would call it. Where this dog is really old, but I want him to experience love. I can't imagine being abandoned at that age. It's just heartbreaking. So that's what my message to people would be, I guess, is don't think if you get a dog from a breeder that they're going to turn out perfect any more than your kids did.
I know. Well, that's great. You're getting that dog. And that's a German Shepherd?
Yeah, and he doesn't have any hair on his body. He's lost all his hair. I'll get him healthy.
You will. Those are great dogs. I've had one that it was adopted when he was 2 or 3, I think, and somebody was moving away, and he was a great dog.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Smart. Okay, well, let me say thanks for being here today, Cheri. I could have kept you here all day.
Thank you for having me. No, I really appreciate the opportunity, and it was fun, and I hope your viewers enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I'm so passionate about animals anyway, especially dogs. So I'm happy that you took the time to be here, and I'm going to make sure I get all the right links out.
Thank you.
I want to thank the viewers for their continued support. And please find Cheri on Facebook and Instagram. And her website is Cheri Wulff Lucas. .com, and I'll have that under the YouTube replay. Also follow both Cheri and myself on Canyon Star TV. That's canyonstar.tv, and you can sign up for that for free. And then make sure you follow her and go to her websites and share this replay of the interview on your social media sites. And to your own success, keep on rocking it, and join me soon for more live interviews in Tamarah's Closet with talented people from all over the world. Take care.